Do you know what really happens to your body when sex stops being part of your life after 70? We're not just talking about desire or intimacy. We're talking about health, hormones, memory, vitality. Many women, as they grow older, find themselves distanced from sexual life, sometimes by choice, sometimes due to the absence of a partner. But the body feels it, and it reacts. Science is clear. Stopping sexual activity in old age can accelerate hormonal aging, harm the heart, weaken the immune system, affect the brain, and break deep emotional bonds. In this video, you'll learn about the 4 real effects that the lack of sexual activity has on a woman's body after 70, and how to recover some of that energy, even if intimacy is no longer what it used to be. If this topic resonates with you in any way, stay until the end. You might recognize yourself in some of these signs or discover paths to reignite your presence in the world. Take this opportunity to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This way, you support this work and continue receiving content that values the health, body, and truth of mature women. Talking about sex after 70 is still taboo, but ignoring the subject comes at a cost, paid in silence, in symptoms no one connects, in diagnoses that never come. Many mature women begin to notice a series of changes in their bodies and minds, and believe it's just normal aging. But the truth is that stepping away from intimacy can trigger deep, and often avoidable, transformations. Sex isn't an obligation, but when it disappears completely, without being replaced by other forms of connection, touch, affection, or pleasure, the body interprets it as a shutdown signal. What comes next is not a theory. It's what science has already proven, and what thousands of women experience, often without knowing why. Now let's look at the first impact that occurs when sex stops being part of a woman's life after 70. Talking about sex after 70 is still taboo, but ignoring the subject comes at a cost, paid in silence, in symptoms no one connects, in diagnoses that never come. Many mature women begin to notice a series of changes in their bodies and minds, and believe it's just normal aging. But the truth is that stepping away from intimacy can trigger deep, and often avoidable, transformations. Sex isn't an obligation, but when it disappears completely, without being replaced by other forms of connection, touch, affection, or pleasure, the body interprets it as a shutdown signal. What comes next is not a theory. It's what science has already proven, and what thousands of women experience, often without knowing why. Now let's look at the first impact that occurs when sex stops being part of a woman's life after 70. Effect 1. Hormonal decline accelerates aging of the body and mind. When sexual activity disappears from a woman's life after 70, the body doesn't react immediately, but it records it. Silently, it begins to shut down functions that were previously maintained by internal stimuli, many of which came from intimacy. This is where the first major effect begins: the accelerated drop in hormones that support physical energy, emotional balance, and mental clarity. Many people believe that after menopause, hormones simply stabilize at a new level, but the reality is a bit different. Even after menopause, the body still produces testosterone, estrogen, oxytocin, dopamine. At lower levels, yes, but they're still present. And it's these hormones that help preserve muscle mass, bone strength, skin elasticity, vaginal lubrication, memory, and even a good mood. The problem is, without stimulation, these hormones plummet. And sex, when experienced with pleasure, safety, and affection, acts as a natural trigger for that production. It's not just about orgasm. It's about touch, desire, connection, skin to skin, emotional presence. When that disappears, the symptoms don't take long to appear. Constant fatigue, lack of interest in activities that were once enjoyable, a feeling of heaviness in the body, mood swings, difficulty concentrating, a sense of emptiness or apathy. But since all of this is happening inside the body of an older woman, many professionals, and even family members, simply say, "It's just age." But age alone doesn't explain such a drastic hormonal collapse. What explains it is the absence of stimulation, the absence of pleasure, the absence of connection. Take the case of Mrs. Elvira, 74 years old. She spent most of her life married, but after her husband died, She completely shut herself off from any kind of intimacy. She said she didn't want that anymore, that she had already lived everything she needed to live. In the 2 years that followed, she began to feel an unexplainable fatigue. She lost her appetite, started forgetting simple words, and even after normal test results, something in her seemed dimmed. It was during a consultation with a geriatrician specialized in women's health that she heard, for the first time, "Your body misses being touched." And for the first time, she cried. With support, Mrs. Elvira didn't seek a new partner, but she sought presence. She started dancing, began caring for herself with more tenderness. She felt her body begin to awaken. Sex doesn't need to return, but the pleasure of being alive does, because when hormones go silent, the entire body loses its will to remain. Effect 2. The heart loses a silent ally. Few people realize it, but sexual activity has a direct impact on heart health. And we're not talking about romance, we're talking about physiology. Sex, when experienced with affection and pleasure, acts as a natural form of exercise for the cardiovascular system. During the act, the heart rate increases in a controlled way. Blood pressure adjusts, blood vessels dilate, circulation improves, and more importantly, the body releases substances that fight inflammation, reduce stress, and protect the arteries. Now imagine what happens when that source of stimulation disappears completely. Over time, the heart loses that involuntary training. Heart rate becomes more static, circulation less efficient, and the body begins to show subtle, yet significant, signs of weakening. It's not uncommon for mature women, after distancing themselves from intimate life, to begin reporting shortness of breath when climbing stairs, irregular heartbeat, leg pain due to poor circulation, unstable blood pressure, unusual fatigue. And this isn't just a coincidence. The lack of consistent cardiovascular stimulation affects not just the physical, but also the emotional. The less vitality flows, the less will to live is felt. Take the case of Mrs. Margarita, 76 years old. After her husband passed away, she withdrew emotionally. She didn't want to talk anymore, didn't want to go out, and certainly didn't want to discuss anything intimate. As the months went by, she noticed that simple tasks, like making the bed or watering the plants, began to require more effort. During a routine checkup, her doctor noticed that her circulation was impaired, even though there were no visible illnesses. The reason? Lack of physical and emotional stimulation. The advice was simple, but profound. You need movement, and you need emotion. Margarita started attending senior dance classes. She made new friends. She laughed again. She felt her body warm up. And the most surprising thing, her fatigue disappeared. Her blood pressure stabilized, and her heart began to beat lightly again. The female body is sensitive to the absence of contact, and the heart, as both a symbolic and biological center of life, senses when a woman emotionally fades. The good news is that the body responds quickly to the call for connection. You don't need to have sex to protect your heart, but you do need to allow yourself to feel, to be moved, to connect, to move. The absence of sex can be replaced by affection, presence, and pleasure in other forms. But the emptiness can't be left unanswered, because when the heart is forgotten, it quietly gets sick. Effect 3. Immunity weakens in a subtle and dangerous way. Have you noticed how some people, after a certain age, start getting sick more often? A cold that lingers, a flu that comes back, mild infections that won't go away. It's not always just age. Often, it's the body asking for connection. Science has already proven emotional and physical intimacy are directly linked to the strength of the immune system. Sex, when experienced with pleasure and safety, triggers a series of chemical reactions that boost the body's natural defenses. During intimate moments, and also during affectionate gestures like hugs or prolonged touch, the body releases oxytocin, which reduces stress and regulates the nervous system. Endorphins, which relieve pain and improve mood, dopamine and serotonin, which balance the hormonal system, and an increase in immunoglobulin A, an essential antibody that protects against viruses and bacteria. Now imagine what happens when all of that disappears. The immune system becomes more exposed, more fragile, slower to respond. A woman might be well nourished and taking her vitamins, but without affection, without connection, without pleasure, something inside her stops working properly. That's exactly what happened to Mrs. Newser, 78 years old. Widowed for over a decade, with no children nearby, she led a very lonely life. She began experiencing recurrent urinary tract infections, along with respiratory flare-ups, even outside of cold seasons. During a checkup, her geriatrician asked an unusual question. "How's your emotional life?" She replied, "Life isn't moving." From that point on, with psychological support and encouragement to re-engage socially, Newser started attending community meetups for mature women. There, she found something she hadn't felt in years: real human presence. Hugs, laughter, long conversations, and a lightness she thought would never return. 6 months later, her infections stopped. Her energy returned, and tests showed more stable immune levels. That kind of change doesn't come from medicine. It comes from the chemistry of affection, from touch, from presence. Of course, immune health depends on many factors: diet, sleep, exercise, medication. But the lack of intimacy and connection affects the body in ways that most tests can't detect. And when the immune system weakens, everything in the body feels slower, harder, heavier. But what's often missing isn't medicine. It's human warmth. It's not about returning to an active sex life. It's about bringing the body back into contact with life, in an emotional, affectionate, safe way. Because the female body, it blossoms when touched with respect, and it gradually becomes ill when left unattended. Effect 4, emotional intimacy fades, and with it, the joy of living far beyond physical touch. Sex is also a space for emotional connection. It's in that intimacy with someone you trust that the body relaxes, and the heart feels seen, desired, valued. When that intimacy disappears, and no new form of it emerges, something much deeper begins to dim. The sense of connection, belonging, the joy of being alive. After 70, many women distance themselves from intimate life for a variety of reasons: physical pain, grief, fear of rejection, changes in their own bodies. And all of this is understandable. But when emotional intimacy fades as well, loneliness begins to set in. It's a different kind of loneliness. It's not just about being alone. It's being with someone and still feeling distant. It's living under the same roof, but without touch, without affection, without deep conversation. It's waking up and going to sleep, without being remembered as a woman, and it silently eats away at the soul. That's what happened to Evelina, 75 years old, married for nearly 5 decades. She and her husband shared a home, expenses, responsibilities. But it had been years since they shared skin, or even exchanged a look. Over time, Evelina began to feel a vague sadness. It wasn't deep depression. It was a constant lack of enthusiasm, as if nothing moved her anymore. In a conversation with a friend, she opened up. "I feel like I stopped existing as a woman. I've become a ghost of myself." This kind of disconnection affects more than just emotions. It impacts health, self-esteem, the desire for self-care. Women who feel forgotten in their femininity often stop looking in the mirror. They stop getting dressed up, stop dreaming, stop feeling pleasure. But it doesn't have to be the end. With help, Evelina and her husband started a new kind of reconnection. No pressure, no demands, just a commitment to look each other in the eyes again, to touch each other with respect, to have deep conversations once more. Little by little, emotional intimacy returned, and with it, so did lightness. It's not sex, in and of itself, that heals. It's what it represents: affection, safety, surrender, warmth, humanity. And if it can't happen the same way anymore, it can be reborn in a different way. In a hand-on-hand, a long hug, a shared sunbath, a slow dance in the middle of the room. Because when emotional intimacy disappears, the body feels it. But when it returns, even gently, the body is reborn. After everything we've seen, maybe the question isn't, "Why is my body like this?" but rather, what does my intimacy story say about how I have, or haven't, been touched by life? Every woman has her own path. Some left sex behind by choice, others because of pain, many because of circumstances no one noticed. But the body doesn't forget. It stores memories of pleasure, of absence, of touch, of waiting. And even at 70, 80, or beyond, it still asks for presence. It's not too late. It's never too late. There's still time to look at yourself with kindness, to reconnect with what makes you feel alive, even if it's in a new way. What comes next isn't an ending, it's an invitation. Now that you know the 4 silent effects that body and mind experience when sexual life disappears after 70, it's easier to understand why so many mature women feel disconnected, tired, forgotten, even by themselves. What we've seen here isn't about morality. It's not about performance. It's not about going back to experiencing sex like in youth. It's about recognizing that intimacy, pleasure, and touch have no expiration date. It's about understanding that the body continues to ask for presence, even when time has passed, and that there are new, gentler, safer ways to continue experiencing life's sensuality, even without the sexual act itself. For many women, this conversation has never happened. Not with family, not with doctors, not with friends. But it needs to happen now, because silence comes at too high a cost. If you've made it this far, it's because this video touched something deep inside you. So I'd like to invite you to leave a comment with the phrase, "There is still life and pleasure for me." This simple gesture can inspire other women. It can create space for more people to speak about what they feel. And it might be the first step for you to reconnect with something that may have been asleep inside you. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss any content like this. Here, we talk about body, soul, health, and truth, with respect, with depth, and with courage. Thank you for being here. You are not alone. Your story, your body, and your desire remain sacred, even after 70. And if someone told you otherwise, you can start freeing yourself from that now. See you in the next video.